Kavet. You're listening to ALANUI MELE on PBS Hawaii.
So this is Meso, and you're listening to ALANUI MELE on PBS Hawaii. Peace.
Listen up, this is Danny One, and you're listening to Hawaiʻi Hip-Hop History via ALANUI MELE on PBS Hawaii. Check it out.
I first remember hearing him on Radio Free Hawaiʻi, 102.7 FM. He was a part of a band, the Musical Deviants, led by zany and fearless Sheriff Norm. Together, they helped break ground on an FM radio station that was 100% controlled by listeners. For decades, he has been writing and reporting on the movers and shakers, the unsung MCs, DJs, singers, and musical groups that thrive on the underground of Hawaii's music scene. Without him, many of us in the hip-hop scene would never be mentioned in any mainstream media publication. A true trailblazer that opened up a vintage clothing and music shop in 2005, long before the vintage boom a few years ago. He has always had a golden eye for what's next, with life hacks to operate between the analog and digital world, a true Renaissance man and a hardcore University of Hawaii sports fan. This is the low-key Hawaii's Anthony Bourdain, Shawn Speedy Lopes.
Wow.
What up, Shawn?
What an intro. Oh, thank you, Kavet.
Hey, man. Hey, it's got to happen, man.
That's going to be my epitaph.
We'll go that too far ahead, too far ahead. But yeah, how you doing, Shawn?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for jumping on ALANUI MELE. Appreciate it. So first of all, which I keep forgetting to ask the people I interview, how did they get their names? We had Jimmy Taco, which I totally spaced out. I'm asking him how I got Jimmy
I would like
Taco,
to know too. Yeah.
Right? And then we had Kilowatts the Mongoose. He kind of went into it. Kilowatts the Mongoose, a.k.a. Jam Watts. He kind of went into it. He was given that name. How did you get Speedy?
This was during the Radio Free Hawaiʻi days. So in the early few weeks of the radio station, Sheriff Norm, who was basically the ringleader of the whole radio station, had this concept of taking live requests on the air, and we would just play them live, right? Like anything, any
Crazy.
genre, metal,
Nice.
punk, rock,
Yes.
grunge, hip hop. No matter what your request was, we had a CD, a wall of CDs and vinyl and everything. So I would be running the board for Muhammad.
Okay.
Because it was a little bit too much for him to handle.
Right.
Because he would just go off on social and political topics. So
Right.
my job basically was to produce his show and keep him focused.
In line, yeah.
Yeah. So when he would do these live requests, Muhammad didn't quite get the memo. So what he thought was, what we're supposed to do is take a live call on the air, get the request. I would go grab the CD, play it.
Wow.
Live on the air.
Live.
And we were supposed to play the whole song, but as soon as a new call would pop up, he would take the call. So it would be like 8 seconds of one song, and then he'd take the other call, and I'd be like, well, Muhammad, wait. But he'd take the other call. Okay, what do you want to hear? And it would be a totally different song, and I would do my best to keep up.
So once he said, what do you want to hear? You have to go and instantly go get it and cue it up.
So you might hear just 10 to 15 seconds of a song, and he'd be taking another call.
Wow. So wait, real quick, Muhammad. What was his radio name? His name was
He was Muhammad, like Mad Muhammad, Muhammad, just Muhammad.
Right. And this year was, what year did Radio Free start?
That was 1991.
91. Wow. So you were like pretty much like trying to keep him on task, and then he gave you the name?
No, Norm did actually.
Okay.
Yeah, because no one else could keep up with Muhammad when he did this live requesting on the air.
Right.
I was the only one that could keep up with him. So,
and what happened if you guys didn't have the song?
He would just say, "Okay, we don't have that song. What else do you want to hear?" And we'd have to go grab something else. But all the time I spent as a kid in record stores, I could point out where the CDs and the vinyl was. Right, because everything was alphabetized. So I could pick it out really quickly. I could actually keep up with him.
And you're the guy putting it in, queuing it and playing
exactly, Live on the air.
Live on the air. Which is
total chaos.
Unheard of anywhere.
It's ridiculous. Why would you ever do that on the radio? It sounded like absolute chaos. And people would call in, hey, bruh, something's wrong with the radio. But it's like, no, we're doing live requests. We're not doing that the right way, but
It's amazing.
yeah.
It's amazing, but it's okay. So you already alluded to Radio Free Music
right.
or Radio Free, the radio station. How did Norm come up with that?
This is pretty interesting. Okay, so Norm is from LA.
Right.
He came to Hawaii maybe in the 1970s to work at a record store here. He had a relationship with one of the record stores. Just to keep it short. And then he had met his wife out here who had opened Jellies.
Oh, okay.
And at some point she hired him.
Okay.
He totally revolutionized the store. Like he made them a lot of money because he knew how to buy and sell records.
Right.
So they bought and sold records and books, and it became an absolute empire, right?
Yeah,
Within a few years. Like you remember in the 80s, I mean,
Jellies.
okay, there was Tower Records, but the largest independent music store was Jellies. No
Was that
question.
the one on Pikoi?
Well, initially it was on Ke'eaumoku across the street from Tower Records. It shared space with like a lighting store.
Okay.
It was really tiny, pretty
Right.
small.
Okay.
But then quickly they earned a lot of money, enough to move to that cavernous 404 Pikoi space.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
big
yeah.
gigantic warehouse.
I remember that.
It was a huge store. And the timing was right. It's everything was exploding in the 80s, right? Like hip hop was still pretty new.
Right.
Heavy metal was exploding. Punk rock, he carried everything. Any sort of genre or subgenre, Jellies had it. If Tower Records didn't have it, for sure they would have it.
Yeah, definitely.
Imports as well.
And he was pretty much on the pulse of that at that time, coming from LA to Hawaii in the 80s.
Yeah. He's a guy that doesn't come into the job with any kind of preconceived notions of what a store should sell. He's kind of a populist, right? In that he wants the people to tell him what a store should bring in or what a radio station should play.
Nice.
So I don't know if you realize this too, but with the concept of Radio Free Hawaii, we all know it as starting in 1991, but he actually took the concept to KIKI AM in 1979.
Wow. Okay, did not know that.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of before our time.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I do remember as a kid, AM radio was a lot bigger than FM. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that.
Okay, because it sort of changed over when boom boxes and the Walkman came into existence. So everybody wanted, to experience stereo sound.
Yeah.
You didn't want to listen to a transistor radio anymore.
Right.
But before then, like I would say up until the late 70s, AM radio was king. People listened to KKUA AM, KIKI AM.
Wow.
Yeah. So he had taken that concept to KIKI, he had told me, AM.
And KIKI was, what frequency was that?
That was 83, maybe? 83 on the AM dial.
Okay. And he approached them with this whole concept of free radio, pretty much.
Yeah, so he had hammered out this deal where whatever showed up on the top 36 would get played on the station.
Right.
And they went from, I think, like a 4 share to a 12 share, which in radio terms, I guess, is pretty astronomical. Basically, you're tripling or quadrupling your audience in a span of a few months.
Wow.
Yeah. So what happened was, and this is all stuff he told me for this book that I'm writing.
Okay.
But basically, the owner of the station at the time had wanted to take his concept nationwide because it was just working miraculously. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. And Norm said, "No, I'm not letting you do that. This is my concept.
Yeah, my idea."
So he basically kicked Norm off the station and took it over. And Norm says, well, it failed after that because they didn't follow the balloting procedure where people vote. This is before the internet. So you couldn't just go onto your computer and vote for songs back then.
You had to actually like fill out a ballot.
Physically, you would have to go to Woolworths or Long's Sears,
Gems.
Exactly. And go fill out these ballots.
Right.
So that failed for them, and he moved on.
Right.
I do remember in high school, maybe like in 1985, he took the concept to KWAI AM. and he did the same thing. But by that point,
Radio was already transitioning to FM.
exactly. So KWAI was sort of like an FM station, but still on AM. So they had a hard time, I'm sure, keeping up with the FM stations.
yeah.
So that lasted only about a year.
80, 86,
Right.
87.
And from what Norm would tell me,
At the same time, he's working at Jellies. He's at Jellies.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you could I'm sure you could vote at Jellies.
Right.
I remember in my neighborhood, you could go to the gem department store
Right.
and vote.
Right.
That's how I knew about it. I went to the record department and filled out ballots.
So
and
then
stuff.
he actually, how did he get the one? I mean, we got to get Norm on here, but
yeah.
so 102.7 happened in 91? 91.
So basically at KWAI, they kind of balked at some of the stuff that was getting on, right? Like
Right.
suicidal tendencies.
Wow.
They're like, I'm not going to play
Nice.
that. Or
Okay.
Metallica, they were like, we're not playing that. So after the station folded, the concept went dormant until 1991. And then by that time, I think people had kind of caught up to what was really going on
Right.
with music, right? Because although it wasn't on radio, like thrash metal was
Yeah,
huge,
yeah.
and grunge was just starting up.
Right.
and,
Hip hop
was huge,
Yeah.
If you wanted to buy your 12-inch DJ singles, you'd go to Jellies. They'd have everything.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And kids would line up and buy all the latest.
I would hide
singles.
records. I was one of those guys.
Yeah,
I would get doubles, hide the other one, and
Right. The
and
one
then-
you wanted in like maybe in like the polka section,
Yeah.
right? So
And
nobody
then
would find it.
I'd buy the one that I had money for, go back hoping that it was still there,
Yeah.
then buy the double.
Yeah.
Or if I didn't have money at all, I'd go and get that record and hide
Yeah.
it. I'm sure everybody did.
Yeah.
Right. So did you work at Jellies first before you were on
Yeah,
the
it
radio?
was. I mean, everybody kind of worked at Jellies. Like all the people I've been interviewing for my book, like
Right.
a lot of people.
Who are some of
worked
the
at Jellies.
people you interviewed for that book?
Oh, these are all like people in the punk rock scene. So, a lot of people who were not just punk rock, but
Right.
I mean the underground rock scene. So,
Yeah.
So bands that were popular at the time, like I got every member of Hat Makes a Man, every member of the original Port Out Pondering, Jack Law from the Wave.
Wow.
right? Like so many people who were involved in the scene. So
But the punk and the rock scene hand in hand with hip hop at that time were kind of like, I feel like we listened to everything. I mean, I listened to
yeah.
both sides of it all.
Right.
Do you see why that they were so at that time in the 90s? They're pretty much like not hand. Yeah, I guess you could say hand in hand. You know what I mean? Because it worked.
Right.
To have a radio station like Radio Free playing
Right.
PE and then jumping on to
Anthrax,
right?
I
Anthrax
mean,
right after.
Public Enemy and Anthrax made records together,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, you remember, I know from your time skating, like kids listen to everything, right?
Oh yeah. I
By
mean,
that point,
yeah.
by the 90s.
That's how I got exposed to pretty much everything, punk, thrash, and that opened my mind. Skateboarding, off subject, but skateboarding basically opened my mind to a lot of those things.
Right.
Ska, metal,
Right.
hip hop. I mean, the hip hop wasn't cracking. Actually, hip hop wasn't even cracking when I first started skateboarding.
Mhm,
It was rock, straight up rock
Mhm.
and metal, I could say, and then hip hop came.
yeah, from
little
the,
later.
From the mid 80s on, I think, I guess from the mid 80s, I think a lot of the skater kids would listen to punk and some metal and stuff.
Yeah.
But as it progressed into the 90s, like everything gets kind of mashed up, right?
Right.
Not just on Radio Free Hawaii, but I mean in society at large. Like kids listen to everything, like rave and hip hop and all of that.
So were you asked to be a part of like the new upstart of Radio Free?
I had a show on K2H, right? I did like a freeform
Hey.
overnight radio show on K2H, and then
What year was that? You're on K2H.
like before Radio Free Hawaii, so we're talking like 1990, 89, whatever.
Right. For like a year, 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. And then but I wasn't a student. I never went to college. I never went to UH. I was just kind of like a community member.
Oh, nice.
Because when kids get out of school for summer, right?
Right.
Go home or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a shortage of DJs, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You can kind of slip in sometimes, right?
Oh, yeah.
Especially back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's happening now because not too many people want to get on radio.
Yeah, yeah.
So
yeah.
K2H right now has experienced a shortage of radio DJs.
I know it's interesting. Like I'll turn on the radio, going to work, and there'll be no DJs, just music.
Yeah, they pre-recorded stuff,
Yeah.
and it's kind of sad because you can learn a lot from that radio.
Right.
But anyway, so you're at K2H, and then
So I did have some experience,
Right.
and then when I had gotten word of Norm starting the station, because I was working at Jellies, I was just like, oh, can I get in? Can I get in? And I think I got like the last slot,
wow,
which was like an overnight weekend slot. But I didn't care. I was like, yes, I'm here.
yeah.
And then that turned into producing Muhammad's show, and then getting my own.
Who are some of the DJs, fellow DJs, was on Radio Free?
Oh, there's so many that came and went. I mean, Muhammad came from K2H, and he's not like a typical DJ that you would expect to
Right.
be like on a music show, because his specialty was like talking about politics and social issues. But
Yeah.
for some reason, Norm loved him.
I mean, dude, Norm had to be a visionary because as a kid growing up, Muhammad was the guy to listen to
Yeah.
because he was so off kilter. He was like
was off
so
the wall,
raw.
right? Yeah.
Raw. He had no
Hilarious,
filter.
too.
Yeah, hilarious. I mean, it did help that he had his like accent that was thick,
Yeah.
and he was so like sarcastically drawn when he spoke. But you loved it, and then you get on the radio, and if he didn't like you, he just straight X you out.
His show was hilarious.
I would call and like imitate him,
Yeah.
and he wouldn't even be like mad. He'd just be like, say some quick witty thing,
yeah.
and then boom.
He had such a like great sense of humor as well. You know,
Yeah.
like,
But Kathy with a K is from there too,
yeah,
right?
Kathy with a K, who's probably the only one that's still on radio.
Right.
Dave O'Day
Right.
came from K2H. There were guys like Lopes and Pinky Passion, who to this day, Pinky Passion is still one of my favorite DJs.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of K2H guys and girls came to Radio Free?
Initially, yeah. I mean, Shawn, who had like the best like alternative rock show.
Yes.
Like she was so good. Yeah. So there was the core of the first DJs at Radio Free Hawaiʻi were from K2H. I think a lot of it was because we actually believed in the concept that Norm had
a
told us
total
about.
freeform,
Yeah, exactly.
100%
We could
ran
get
by
down with that.
listeners.
Whereas already seasoned DJs were like, "Oh, this is ridiculous. It's never going to work.
Right.
How can you play every single genre of music back to back? Like sounds like chaos."
But it did work.
It did for 6 years, right?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
6 years.
Yeah. Which is longer than a lot of stations
Oh yeah.
that come and go these days, right?
So and during that time, there was there more than one hip hop radio show on Radio Free or one?
There might have been, but I mean, I do remember DJ Static.
Yeah, he was the one, the
So,
listening party.
Yeah.
DJ Static.
That show was awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And it was and
What did you think of it? Like,
Oh no, it was awesome because at that time, so I wasn't. Oh, did I? That might have been. When did that start? Do you remember the start of Static?
somewhere in the early 90s?
Early 90s. Yeah, I think it
Early to mid.
transitioned. Yeah, I didn't have my show yet on
Right,
K2H
right.
in 97. So I think that might have been 95, 6 or
Yeah,
something.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, because Radio Free went to 97. Yeah, okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So I think 95-ish, maybe 96.
So I was just kind of wondering if in any way his show kind of had an effect on or inspired you to have your own show.
Oh, I mean, it was definitely Soul 69, Itaro and Size.
Oh yeah.
That was like the main
Who was my
influence.
roommate? Like
Size?
Size was my roommate.
Shout out to Size One. Definitely get him on the podcast. Well, I never wanted to do radio, period. Right. But the GM asked me when I transferred over from Leeward to UH.
Yeah.
Hey, do you want to do radio? Because Itaro and Size, they were graduating, right? So
Yeah,
when
they had an awesome show as well.
their show was awesome. And then Derek, he had a show, and the Prude. So I talk about this. Prude, he played a lot of hip hop, but he played a lot of down tempo, abstract,
Yeah.
Shadow, Jazz Fudge,
Right.
Ninja Tune, and then D played a little bit more of the up tempo. I could say, more friendly,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
still underground stuff. The 90s R&B boom bap,
Right.
and then you had Size and Taro. Soul 69, they played everything, live mixes, DJ Min, DJ Asia, Danny One.
Yeah.
And, so I wasn't really influenced as to do radio, but when I was asked to do it, I knew what I wanted to do.
Got
and then
it.
Static had his show, right?
Right.
But Static's show was always felt like it was like, the untouchable, like K2H, I finally got in, right?
Yeah.
Before I became a host, but Static was like, oh, DJ Static, like, drama, Size. Yeah, I mean, but everybody basically went from K2H to, after K2H was done, they went to Radio Free Music. So Static, shout out to Static. He's in LA right now. Whenever he comes home, I'm gonna try to get him on.
Yeah.
But what memories do you have of DJ Static's show?
Oh, it was awesome. I mean, it was the only show I think at the time that you could listen to where you could hear stuff that wasn't mainstream, right?
Yeah.
And I also like the fact that he brought on people from the scene into the studio, right?
Yeah.
Like you did with your show as well, you know.
Static actually, it was amazing. He actually let us. It was crazy because there would be like crowds outside of Radio
of the
Free
station.
And Radio Free was located where?
In Waipahu. So people be hanging out on the porch, right? In the back of the station.
And it was in like Waipahu in the 90s. So it wasn't the most safest place. Do you have any stories about anything that went down while you guys were there in Waipahu?
Oh, there's so many. I mean,
with like the neighborhood.
One of the problems was for a while we had because there was still sugarcane there, right? A little bit, and there'd be rats sometimes. Once in a while you'd hear them scurrying up above you, like in the ceilings, you know. And there was one time I went to get lunch. And then I bought a plate lunch, and then I left it on my desk. And then I came back, and there was a big hole into the styrofoam. What? I'm not eating this. I was so upset. I just threw it out. I was just like,
dude,
okay, can somebody just get an exterminator at some point?
Because to people that didn't know, Radio Free Hawaii was located where exactly?
The entrance to Waipahu, pretty much. Just a little bit after Waipahu High School on the right side. People know because they'll remember the satellite dish that was in the backyard, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's there anymore, but
right.
But for the longest time, that was one of the biggest landmarks in Waipahu.
Yeah.
Was that big old KDEO satellite dish.
Any problem with the neighborhood at all?
No, not at all.
No thugs trying to get up there and get on the mic?
No.
Shout out to Waipahu. I remember when I first found out it was there, I was tripping. They're like, hey, why don't you come to Static Show? I'm like, okay, where is it?
It was a country station before that.
Right.
You know? So I think the reason Norm had started Radio Free Hawaii is because he had approached Bob Lowe, who was the owner of the station, and the station wasn't doing so well as a country music station. So he had leased the station to Norm. And Norm just thought, you know what, this is great because I don't have to deal with station management. I program the station, right? I don't have to make a deal with the station president.
Right.
So he finally had his own station. And that's part of why it lasted so long, because he didn't have to answer to anybody. He just said, I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. And it's going to get done.
Oh, like they would say, Norm was punk rock.
Pretty much.
I mean, the sheriff, right?
The sheriff.
But let's go back, rewind all the way to like when you grew up. You grew up in what area did you grow up?
Kalihi.
Yeah. And what was your first experiences, moments with hip hop?
Well, I think for a lot of people in Hawaii, the first time you experience hip hop or rap music would be 1979 when Rapper's Delight comes on the radio.
Did you hear it on the radio first?
Yeah, I did. And, at the time, it just seemed kind of like a cool novelty hit. Like, kids liked it because it was kind of sing-songy and it was rhymey. But it just seemed like a novelty hit. Like, you didn't realize that this whole movement was going to come behind it after it, right?
Well, if you listen to, I mean, when I first heard Rapper's Delight, I think about it now. Yeah, I didn't think of it as like groundbreaking per se.
Exactly.
But like a bop, right? Like,
Oh, this is kind of catchy.
Yeah. Like, okay, cool. And then like, you're okay, that's it. You didn't think it was going to be a movement.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
Culture, right? So what could you say, being in Hawaii, hearing Rapper's Delight, when did you kind of figure out that you wanted to get down with the hip hop culture, one of the elements?
Oh, right away. I mean, I wanted to get the record. And, if you remember that record, you could not get a 45 of it if you liked one song. Back in the day, you could just get a little record, right? A little 45.
Yeah.
Side A was the hit. Side B was like a throwaway song or whatever.
I think it was Ninth Wonder.
Yeah, so you couldn't just buy a 45.
Right.
You had to, when you went into the store, it was just this big 12-inch single. And I'd never seen one before. Most people had never seen a 12-inch single back then.
Yeah.
It's for DJs, right?
Right.
You have like the long version on the back, or you have a remix or something on the back.
Extended version.
Right. So all the kids like knew the words to what was being played on the radio. So I remember writing down the lyrics to like the long version just so I could like, get one up on them. You know
go
what I
to
mean?
school and we wrapped it like the long
And
version.
you're like, oh, what is that? Oh,
So
it's
did
the
you?
long version.
So you just started doing that as like because you loved it so much, and then you started emceeing it first.
Yeah, yeah. And then, like other records would come soon after, like
Okay.
Grandmaster Flash, like
Right.
anything on Sugar Hill Records, like started coming out. Like you could get those compilation records they'd have like the Funky 4+1
Right,
plus
yeah.
the Sequence and Curtis Blow. And like, like there'd be all this, you realize this is a whole scene. This is a whole thing. This is really a genre unto itself. I mean, I'm at the time I was like in the 5th or 6th grade,
Right,
5th
right.
grade, whatever it was. But soon after, like in the ensuing years, there's just so much more rap music that came out. I mean, you could even take it further back, honestly, because when I was a kid, like I remember in the 70s, like even earlier than rappers, they're like, if you consider street dancing part of hip hop culture, which I
Right.
do, I mean, kids were locking, right? They were doing the Campbell lock, right? I don't know how many people remember what that is, but there was that TV show, What's Happening, right?
We rerun.
And Rerun, right, was a character, and he'd be locking all the time. I just couldn't wait until there was an episode where he'd be locking, because it was just like so much fun as a kid to watch these guys.
It's crazy to think about that Rerun was doing that, not knowing that would have influence on a whole generation,
Yeah.
right? So locking came out before Sugar Hill.
Oh, this is even before our time. Like as a toddler, it came out when I was a toddler, but we had no knowledge of this.
Right.
Like it was going on the West Coast. So, probably in the early 70s, if you turn on the TV, once in a while you might see some kids locking.
Wow.
And I did interview one of the original lockers on the
Right.
island when I was writing for the Honolulu Star Bulletin, and he told me the story of how he had seen some lockers on TV, and there were no VCRs back then. There was no internet. How do you learn how to do this? So what he did was he took a lamp, turned it on, and faced it behind him.
Right.
So he would watch his shadow until he got it.
What?
Perfect, right?
That's a crazy
I mean, that's
story.
so great. Like,
Right. Because you can't use your phone to screen.
that just shows
record.
your passion for something. Like, wow, I just saw these guys on TV doing this crazy dance. I'm going to try and do it.
And so whatever came from his memory of watching
Exactly. But that's how it was back in the day.
that. And who was that? Was that Don Campbell?
I don't know who he had watched, but he had watched.
But
He had watched some
that's who you're
kids.
talking about, though.
No.
Oh.
This is a local kid.
Oh yeah, who's that?
Yeah,
Who's that?
yeah,
Who's
yeah.
that local kid?
Kalani Young was his name.
Nice.
Yeah.
What was his name?
I can't remember. I remember I interviewed him maybe 20 years ago. So
Right.
this was-
He sent me that article.
yeah,
Is that the
yeah,
one?
yeah. It's amazing. Yeah.
Well, so
Pretty
did
amazing
you
story.
start popping and locking pretty much instantly?
I just wasn't. Locking was a little bit early because I was still in elementary school. I didn't know. I just like watching them, right? So
Yeah.
my grandma and my mom would take me to the Farrington High School talent shows,
Oh,
right?
nice.
Like, Limelight 77, Limelight 78 or whatever. And then there'd always be locking. And that was my favorite part. But there was this one year, I think it was maybe 1980, 81 or so. And there were no more lockers.
Wow.
But then these kids came along and they started doing this more fluid type of
Okay.
dance and moonwalking across the stage. And I was like, oh, this is a new type of dance.
Wow.
So,
That's
the
crazy.
new generation had come
Yeah.
along, and it was.
This is
and
at
that was-
Farrington. This is at
yeah,
Farrington.
Yeah. And this was popping.
Do you remember though who they were?
I don't remember who those kids were. They were just some neighborhood kids.
Wow.
But I remember being on the bus one time, and this one kid said, "Hey, I went to all the high school dances. The one school with the most poppers was Farrington. Like everybody was popping.
Wow.
It was a huge thing. You know?
I mean, I don't know. It made sense, right? I mean, you always felt Farrington was technically like what we consider our inner city, right?
right.
And like just way more hip to the street and what's going on like that next level. Like,
Yeah, I think a lot of kids too, like especially like some of the Samoan kids had like relatives in California and stuff.
right.
Or relatives in the military who'd bring back tapes and all of this stuff. So this is how.
And do you remember the transition from locking, popping, when you're like, wait, there's a whole nother
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
breaking.
Yeah, I remember seeing on TV there was this thing about breakdancing. First time I had seen it, and popping was still kind of in vogue
Right.
at that time. I was like, "Oh, this is a new thing." Wow,
What
what
year
is
was that
this?
one? What year is that?
Oh, this would have been like 82.
That's
82. Or
That's
so.
quick. Like
Yeah.
2 years, boom.
Yeah, exactly.
So locking was killing it in the 70s, late 70s
Right. For years.
for years. And then popping, you seen the turn, you're like, hey, what is this new dance?
Right.
2 years later, boom, what is this?
Like,
new
wow,
dance?
what is this? And I would tell my friends about it, and they had no idea what I was talking about. Right, my friends in school.
Right.
Oh, I saw this TV show.
Because there was no
There's this
social media.
dancing. Exactly.
Right. There was no, I mean, yeah, maybe, was there a Betamax at that time?
There was, but like not everybody had. Like, I didn't have one.
I didn't have one.
Yeah.
So unless you were like literally trigger finger waiting on TV to record that.
Exactly.
So you seen it, it was in your head, and you're like, hey, you went back to your friends and was like.
Right, but that's how it was when you were a kid, right? Like if you saw something on TV, you watched it, you had to commit this thing to memory. Because if you didn't have a VCR or anything, or the internet was way off, right? Or like far off into the future. I mean, you just have to commit it to memory and hope at some point you come across it again. So it wasn't until a couple years later, maybe a year and a half, 2 years later, until you actually saw breaking on TV. Like,
do you remember what show that was? Where you seen it and were like, hey,
it was like an ABC News type of thing.
Wow. That's before Flashdance.
Yeah. And then,
Wow.
A couple years. And then,
and so wait, you went back to your friends and was like, yo,
they had no idea what I was talking about.
So you're like, dude, nobody else seen this show.
And nobody knew what I was talking about.
And then a few years later, you're like,
I'm like, okay, that's it. That's what I saw. Like,
and you didn't even know what the name of it was, right? I'm assuming when you see it on TV.
I think they had mentioned that it was breaking. Or break dancing or whatever. So I told my friends, hey, there's this thing called breaking. I know you guys are all popping and stuff, but there's this thing called breaking, and they had no idea what it was. Right?
That is insane to think that in this day and age where it's in the Olympics now.
Yeah.
There's Red Bull BC1, which is, shout out to, Hijack and Arc. They're winning and they're from Hawaii. Like it's like everywhere, global, to a point where we rewind all the way back. And you're like, hey guys, I just seen this on TV. Did you see it? And you're like,
like, no, what
crazy.
Are you talking about?
We just flowing it. We just popped it. Exactly. Break it. I ain't breaking no bones.
That's exactly what I was like. Yeah.
And then next thing you know, like it's boom. And is that before Breaking Hawaii or that Hawaii High show?
I mean, I remember at one time on PBS there was a special, and again, I didn't have a VCR, but I do remember seeing Style Wars
on PBS.
On PBS, that's where it first premiered.
Wow. Oh, okay. So I'm gonna have to go to my.
So Star Wars?
Yeah, of course. I'm gonna see if we can play this
huge documentary.
Yeah, it's huge. It's still. I can watch. You put it on now. I can watch it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it could be at 3 a.m, and if it came on, I'd be like, well, I guess I'm watching Star Wars.
Exactly.
And they played it on PBS in Hawaii.
But again, if you missed it, I mean, good luck. I don't know when you're gonna see it again. Maybe in 20 years when people.
Do you remember what year that was that they played Star Wars on PBS?
Maybe 83
Hawaii?
or so.
That's huge. Yeah. I mean, but you came across it just flipping channels.
I think I had seen it. There'd be listings in the newspaper. I think I had seen it. And I'm like, oh, I want to watch that.
Wow.
Yeah. So actually, talking about Kalihi too. Like, I grew up 2 blocks south of Farrington High School, but 2 blocks east would have been KISA.
Yes.
The radio station, right? On AM. So during the week, it was a Filipino radio station. But I think on Friday nights, maybe even on Saturday nights, they would play all the latest music, like poppin' music and electro. And so, all the Grandmaster Flash stuff and Soul Sonic Force, African Mambata.
So you'd be listening to your radio and it'd be literally down the street playing the music.
Yeah, exactly. So kids in the neighborhood would kind of go up and like knock on the door. Hey, what's going on? And, let me come check this out. Cause that was like,
that's awesome.
That was kind of
do you remember who was programming it? Who was DJing at that time? That's crazy.
Auntie Loki was one of the DJs.
Was that where she was?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
So it was like at the far end of the dial on the AM station. And it was like 2 blocks from where I lived. And, it was maybe on the top floor of this industrial area, like
back then, even more,
warehouses fronting Kapalama Canal.
Right. That, the crazy part about that is that was getting played and is in Kalihi.
Yeah.
And Hawaii's hip hop history has a huge, huge roots in Kalihi. Like Kalihi is like, it would be considered like a borough, right? A New York borough. As for like hip hop. Right. And the fact that Auntie Loki was there playing the music.
And Johnny J Jam
was there. Like it's insane. That's crazy to think about it, and I've never heard it.
We had no idea what they looked like or anything, but they were kind of celebrities, right? Because you listen to that show on the weekends and they played all the cool stuff that nobody else played. Right?
Wow.
Even like some of the funky stuff, Daz Band, Cameo, whatever, mixed in with some of the electro and hip hop.
Oh, it hits all the same. That's why.
Yeah,
definitely.
Exactly. It's all from the same
right.
family tree of funk, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Because funk really in the early days was the basis of hip hop, right?
Yes.
No doubt.
So shoot, going in from the hip hop, when did you start getting into like more the musical side, like the punk, the rock? Was that more in high school or all the same time?
All at the same time, pretty much. I mean, I would go into record stores and I'd see like interesting album covers. Like say, one of the first albums I bought was like If You Want Blood from AC/DC. And as a kid, I have no idea what it sounded like, but there's, on the
cover.
back cover. Yeah, on the cover. Like Angus Young is getting impaled by a guitar and blood spurting out of his torso. I was like, I gotta buy that.
Yes,
what does that sound like?
Yeah.
I have no idea what that sounds like, but I want to buy that.
I mean, explain to us that feeling of going into a record shop, not knowing who the artist is, what technically, you can kind of judge on what genre they play, but just looking at the cover and be like, I gotta buy that.
Yeah. I mean, there was no Spotify. There was no YouTube for you to check out bands. I mean, you just had to kind of take a chance on it. So even as an elementary school kid, I asked my mom for some money to go to the gem department store, go scour the bins and just pick out what I thought looked cool.
Right. So technically it's the Instagram of the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Same concept. Look, you do scroll on your phone, and that looks cool.
Right.
I'll buy it.
You just scroll the record bins
physically.
And back then, like album art was a thing too. Like there'd be like a theme, like on the front cover, and it would relate to whatever's on the back cover. And there'd be, the artwork was a huge thing for albums at the time. So I could get drawn in that way as a kid, as a child, really, like in elementary school, going, wow, this guy's getting like, guitar is going through his body and he's like lying dead on the back cover.
There's blood.
What does this sound like?
Let's
I need to
go.
buy this.
Yeah.
Mom, can I buy this?
No.
Yeah, exactly.
And you go back later.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me get this AC/DC.
Yeah.
But on the cover, on the graphic design and cover, there's also the liner notes.
Yeah.
Which was huge, right? Because you looked at the liner notes.
You learn about the band.
And then you learn about the band. You learn this guy or this artist also was on this this artist's record or produced this. So then you end up buying that record.
Especially with hip hop, because you look at who produced it, right? And you're like, oh, or on
Rick
the
Rubin.
label it was like, oh, if it's on Tommy Boy, it's got to be good.
Right.
If it's on Sugar Hill, it's got to be good.
It's produced by Rick Rubin. Oh, we got to get that.
Exactly.
Boom, we got to get that. Marty Mark.
Right.
Boom, boom, got to get
So
that.
that's how you found out about music sometimes, if you were adventurous enough. You just make these decisions in your mind, like, okay, this seems logical. I'm gonna, if it has this producer and it's on this label, it should be good.
Right. So then was one of your first jobs working at a record store?
Yeah, I worked at Tower Records, and then I worked at Jellies. Yeah.
And did that help you decide in was it 2005-ish to open your own store eventually?
Yeah,
Stylus.
for sure, because I had learned from Norm, right, who had run Jellies, that you actually make more money from used product than you do from new. Your markup is way bigger. So when I started my store, most of what I carried was used product. But I had also learned from taking trips to the mainland that there were these stores that sold clothing in the same way, right?
Right.
You know how we maybe buy a shirt and then we don't wear it for,
Yeah.
we don't wear it after a while, and it's still brand new, but you just, for whatever reason, you don't use it. Women especially have closetfuls of stuff like that, right?
I don't got enough clothes.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
Exactly. So I kind of took that concept of new and used clothing and new and new music in 2005, and
Which wasn't a new concept per se.
Yeah, no, it wasn't.
But I mean, in Hawaii, I felt when you opened Stylus, for those who don't know, Shawn Speedy Lopes opened Stylus, which was location was located where?
It was on the corner of King and University, where the student housing is now.
Right.
Yeah. So
there was right across the street building. Was Two Grooves.
Yeah.
Which is a huge portion of Hawaii hip hop history for the late 90s or more 2000s.
Yeah.
Huge. Shout out to James Viso.
Yeah.
But Stylus was huge because they sold records, a lot of used stuff, used clothing. A lot of those clothes now, when I look back on it, would be worth hundreds of dollars.
Oh, I still have
today.
A lot of that stuff.
Oh.
Just stored away. I just don't know what to do with them.
So, I mean, I don't think you call yourself a visionary, but I always looked at you as always having a golden eye for things that that can be curated, especially with Stylus and the stuff you put out with your show you have, Bide H&L, you know, even working in Radio Free and Jellies and all those. So when you had Stylus, was there any inkling in your head that, oh, this is going to be it in the future? Or you just like, no, I think I like the concept of used, and I'm just going to
it looked like a real viable concept that there weren't a lot of people doing at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, there were people doing used clothing, there were people doing used music, but I kind of married the two.
Right.
And I thought this would be a great concept to join these two worlds together. You know what I mean? The timing could have been better just if I had done it earlier, because at the time, people weren't even buying CDs anymore, right? The iPod had come out at that point, right? 2005. Yeah. The iPod had come out a couple of years earlier, and people were starting to sell their CDs and get rid of their vinyl.
Right, digital.
Yeah.
So you're in a kind of a funky time now.
Yeah.
But fast forward to now, it's 2023, 2019, 2018. Man, if your store could have waited 20 years, 15 years, I mean, you would have been right there, like ahead of the game of everything.
Yeah, and I could have charged a lot more now than I did back then. Like my whole concept back then was 90% of what I sell is under $10.
Wow.
Which if I had the chance to do it over again, I would probably change that.
Yeah.
You know?
So the store lasted for how long?
6 years, so 2005 to 2011.
You know, most businesses don't last 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, 3 years,
It's
maybe
hard,
more.
man.
In Hawaii as well. What are some of the challenges you had of having your own business, opening your own business, being an entrepreneur?
I mean, just just turning a profit every month, which is what you were expected to do, which is what you have to do to stay afloat. You know what I mean?
Right.
Sometimes that could be challenging, especially when your bank account starts dwindling a little bit. Then you start thinking, well, can I still afford to advertise? Or what kind of advertising avenue should I take? Or there's all kinds of decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis, right? To keep your business alive.
You were telling me before you opened the shop, you traveled and from state to state, just what kids would call now thrifting, or heating up the shops. I just call it digging, right? And just go down the line. Yeah. And tell us about that experience before. So you had a preconceived thought, like, I'm going to open a shop, so this is what I need to do.
Yeah. So I needed product, right? And I thought, why don't I just take a trip across the United States in a van?
Yes.
Start off in New York, end up in California.
Let's go.
Right? Down to Miami and go straight across to LA. Yeah. And I found a lot of cool stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because people weren't really all that up on thrifting at the time, right?
Yes.
And the products that I bought was pretty much my initial
startup.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, you must have found some gems.
It was fun.
You probably got a lot of road stories.
I'll tell you this, like the northern states have much better clothes than the southern states. Southern states, I mean, we just wear T-shirts and shorts.
Well, it's
and
hotter.
Jeans and whatever, yeah.
Right, and they're like more, I feel like that's country everywhere, but in the continent. So, I mean, but yeah, I could see that. Up north, I figure they layer more. Right?
Yeah. I mean, you like a Goodwill in New Jersey, I mean, you can find these cool jackets with like like fleece, like and fur, like collars and stuff, and all this really exotic stuff. And then you bring it to Hawaii, and people are like, "Wow, where'd you get this?" Or
it's like commonplace up there.
Yeah.
Did you find a lot of cool band tees, any hip hop stuff, or?
I remember in DC, I found like a bunch of funk records, some Funkadelic and some Parliament. Yeah.
So then you did all of that, and then you opened the store. You came back, opened the store.
Yeah.
Wow.
2005. Yeah.
That's insane. But you were telling me, I mean, that was part of your hitting your goal in life is to hit every state.
Yeah,
right?
Because after I closed the store in 2011, I was looking for any kind of work that was looking for, any kind of occupation that was looking for, that would always allow me a chance to work.
Right.
Like, what am I trying to say?
Yeah.
Occupations where they need a lot of workers.
Right.
And driving was one, right?
Right.
So a friend of mine was a driver, like a cross-country driver, like a long-haul trucker since 1978, older guy.
From Hawaii or?
He lived in Hawaii at the time I knew him. Yeah. And then he had said, yeah, you know what? Go get your license, and then I'll take you across the states, and I'll show you the ropes.
Crazy. So this is after Stylus.
This is after, yeah.
But then before Stylus, you already traveled how many states? Do you know how many states you traveled?
It was like 40 something.
Oh, so you hit 40 already. So you had 10 more left then technically. Or...
Oh, well, let me see. After I'd driven the truck, right, been a truck driver, then it was like 43. So I only had 7 more to go.
Oh, so after Stylus closed down, you're like, I'm gonna hit this 7.
Yeah, exactly. Because how can I leave it at 43, right? Am I gonna die and be like, oh, I haven't been to all 50 states. I've been to 43, but who cares if you've been to 43?
That would suck.
Yeah, exactly.
I would wake you up in your grave.
Yeah.
Shawn, get up.
We need to go to South Dakota.
Or to be like Weekend at Bernie's. Hey, Shawn. Okay, here we go, Shawn. 7 more.
South Dakota was the last state I hadn't been to. For some reason, I went below it and over it. So in 2019,
so you didn't plot any specific reason. Okay, South Dakota's my last state.
Yeah.
No, you just was like, I didn't hit it yet.
Yeah, exactly. That was like, if you looked at a map and you colored in all the states I'd been to, there'd be like a big donut like in the Northwest, right? You'd be like, I did not hit South Dakota. I need to do that. It was great, man. I loved it.
No disrespect, South Dakota, but ain't nobody trying to go to South Dakota.
Oh, no, it was fun, though.
But why was it fun?
You know, there was like Mount Rushmore is interesting to see. It's like it's a big tourist destination. But
and that's in South Dakota.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm bad with that.
No, but there was like this wilderness park that was cool. You could just drive through and like bears would pass you and like wolves.
Yogis. Okay.
Like stuff that you've never wolves and bears. And there'd be like bear poop like in front of you on the road, right? You're like, oh, what is that? Is that from the bear or from the moose or what's going on?
Oh, from the moose.
Yeah, it's like crazy. It was like, that's like, people come to Hawaii because Hawaii's exotic to them. To me, that's exotic.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to anybody from Hawaii, if you see a wolf and a bear while sitting in your car,
that's wild.
That's wild, man.
Yeah.
It's wild.
So South Dakota, Alaska, those kinds of
places. So you know how they tell tourists don't go next to the turtles? So were you one of those tourists that like, yo, I'm going to get next to this bear right now?
Oh, I was in my car. I wasn't getting out.
South Dakota, 50th. Boom.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's it. So do you have plans on continents now? Or
I was thinking maybe now I should do every Canadian province. I know you've been to Canada, right?
Yeah, I've been to Vancouver. I've been to Montreal. I've been to what is that island off of Vancouver? There's an island off of there. It's beautiful. I mean, I've only been there. I've never been in the middle.
Right.
That middle is cutty. I heard it's it's like city, country.
Yeah.
City, country. Like big time city, country.
Right.
But that'd be an interesting one because that's straight winter all day, every day.
Yep.
I mean, I've never heard anybody do that either. So it'd never been done. But through all your travels and through all your experience with the records, through Stylus, radio, you've always been a reporter or per se, or writer.
Yeah.
Right. So who are some of the publications you wrote for locally or anything national?
At first there was a paper called Scrawling Wall that Norm from Jellies put out for a year. And then there were some other ones that came after, like Chaos and Metropolis and Deep. You remember Deep magazine in the 90s? And then from there, Honolulu Weekly, I did like some freelance pieces. And then I got to do like a nightclub column for the Honolulu Advertiser, maybe in 97 or so.
Okay.
So, I mean, writing was always something, you know, I never went to college or anything, but writing was always something that I knew I could do.
Right.
You know what I mean? Even without, journalism, education.
Yeah. You did your Star Bulletin as well.
Star Bulletin after the Advertiser, yeah.
Right. That's crazy. And so what I noticed is you always covered hip hop. I mean, it wasn't your main thing, but you always seem to have the pulse on what is the next or who's doing it, who's the movers and shakers. I mean, you did a bunch of my events, a few times.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first time we had interacted was when I interviewed you for this DJ battle you were doing at UH.
Yeah.
This was maybe like 2001 or something.
Right. Yeah. Was that ITF? Was that the ITF?
No. It was just a battle that you were doing at Hemingway Hall.
Oh yeah, that was
2001.
That was a hip hop movie, like a hip hop movie thing, and I did a DJ battle with Nocturnal.
Yeah.
It was Nocturnal ended it before they were like world champions. Yeah, I was doing a lot of stuff at UH, and I think that's when I first met you.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't even meet face to face at that point. It was just a phone interview at that point.
That's right, dude. Yeah. That's great. But I knew of you already. I knew who you were. Right.
And I'd known you from your show.
Yeah, because if that's 2000-ish, I was about to get kicked off of radio.
2001.
So, but that's why I started doing more events. Yeah. But I mean, you've covered like Visionaries, Sisters in Sound, which is all-female DJ group in the late 2000s, mid-2000s. What other some interviews have you had of local hip-hop?
Local hip-hop, Invisible Ink, right? Todd G. And, there's like anytime somebody I thought was interesting that I had a connection to or that I could find a connection to, I would try and reach out or they might reach out to me as well.
Is that archived anywhere? It's hard to, I mean, you can find it if you're looking, but
if you have, one of the most amazing things you can do is get a subscription to newspapers.com because they save every single issue of the Honolulu Advertiser and the Honolulu Star Bulletin. You can look stuff up. Right. And I sent you a few articles too because there was stuff that I dug up that I thought you would be interested in.
Yeah, we'll go and post it up on our social media and our website. Yeah. Those articles are amazing because it's Hawaii history. Hip-hop history.
It really is,
for sure. But you moved, and then you do that. I mean, do you currently write anything besides?
Well, I've been working on this book for the past 3 years about the underground rock scene here in Hawaii, punk rock, new wave, and all of that stuff.
That's sick. So how long have you been working on the book for again?
3 years, and then I've interviewed over 90 people, maybe close to 100 people so far. Yeah. I don't know when I'm going to be done with it because I'm trying to do it chronologically as you are.
Right? Yeah, it's hard.
So I'm up to from the 70s. I'm right now up until maybe like the mid 90s. So,
has there been any band? I mean, it's not hip hop, but to me, it's hip hop.
Yeah,
it's all relative. Punk rock. Is it just punk rock or rock or like
every type of underground rock?
Right. So who's some of the first underground punk rock bands in Hawaii?
I think arguably, like people would say, the Squids, who were the first house band in Wave Waikiki.
Wow.
Would be arguably the first punk rock band. I mean, there were other bands that were actually playing punk, but they were the first that were doing exclusively original music and had a gig, a regular.
So
gig.
They were at the Wave. Yeah. They had their own night.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Playing punk rock.
Yeah.
At the Wave.
And before that, they were playing at 3D. There's before the Wave, there was they played at 3D Ballroom, which was kind of where Fusions used to be.
Okay. Waikiki.
The third floor of Waikiki. Yeah, of that building in Waikiki.
So what compelled you to do a punk rock book, a rock book?
I think I had read this book called Please Kill Me, and it was basically the history of punk rock beginning with what was going on in New York from like the 60s with like the Andy Warhol like art scene, and then that kind of turned into like the drag scene, which turned into the glam scene, which turned into the punk scene, and it's fascinating stuff.
So does that timeline have any coincides anywhere with Hawaii's timeline?
Yes, in that people in Hawaii there were a core of people who were hip to what was already going on, and some people had gone to New York and saw what was going on with that scene and brought it back to Hawaii.
Wow!
Like everybody has their own sort of relationship with that scene and how they got into it and how they started playing music or what inspired them and what have you. It's fascinating to talk to people about this stuff.
Right. So you did reporting, writing, now you're writing a book, but even somewhere in the middle, you found time to do B-Side H&L. Tell us what B-Side H&L is. Okay,
so in 2015, I had started this TV show called B-Side H&L. It's actually still going on.
Right.
In high school, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I was really inspired by people like Jim Jarmusch and Spike Lee. I really wanted to be a filmmaker and go to film school and go to NYU Film School where they went and all of this. But I was a terrible student in high school, and there's no school that would have ever accepted me with my D grade average, coming out of Barrington.
D+.
Yeah. So fast forward to 2015 when the technology is such that you can actually buy your own equipment and do your own thing, and it would be quality stuff, right? Where you can put it on YouTube or whatever. And I kind of decided then, hey, I'm going to do this, and I'm also going to put it out on Olelo Community TV, right? Community cable access TV. So yeah, I started interviewing people, interviewed you, and covered your events.
Yes, thank you.
And interviewed lots of bands and just what was going on at that time, right?
That's one thing dope about the content. I hate using the word content, but that's what it's called now.
Yeah.
What you produce is, there's no real, like, I can't say you're hip hop. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, he only does hip hop.
Right,
He only does punk. But you have a great way, I guess, elegantly, of, if that's the word to use, to able to cover all these different underground, independent, maybe unheard of
Yeah. Sure.
genres of subcultures of music.
Yeah.
And you do it effortlessly without, being like a newbie, without being, you know what I mean? Like a perp into the culture. Like, you're able to go into the hip hop culture,
Yeah.
talk to all these underground guys, and then you'd be able to boom. Hey, I'm gonna go. Hey, Kavet, I'm gonna go in across the street because I'm covering this band. All right, cool. I would
Right.
see you in downtown. You'd be like, hey, well, you got an event? Oh yeah, I got a Beetroot. Like, I'm gonna cover Beetroot. Okay. Oh, what you got next week? Oh, I'm going to Josh 86's club
Yeah.
or diner. So and so's
Right.
performing.
Right.
I'm covering them too, right? But it was never like a forced thing. Like, why do you think you're able to do that?
It's just my passion for music in general. You know what I mean? Like I said, since I was a kid, I would just scour record stores and I'd be interested in all these different types of music. So I think what inspires me too is just the fact that people here locally are doing their thing, right? And
Yes.
it's inspiring to see that people are doing it, and I like learning about them, and I like covering them and interviewing them and finding out about their art and what makes them tick, and regardless of music, regardless
Right.
of musical style, and I think the underground in especially is what really inspires me, because they're not doing it for fame. They're not doing it to make money or to make a living. I mean, they're just doing this stuff knowing that they may never get anywhere with it.
Yeah, true.
It's not mainstream music. They're probably not going to get anywhere with it, but they have such a passion, and that kind of rubs off on me.
Yes. That's perfect, man. So before we end off, give us a jewel, a gem, something. Your experience that you explained from like back in the day in Kalihi, finding, locking, all the way to now, where you're still traveling, you're writing a book, right? So give us something. Give us some gem, jewel.
Well, I think if you have the inspiration, don't let anything stop you from delving into it. Life is too short. I mean, I know, when you're on your deathbed, you're not going to say, oh, you know what, I should have put in more overtime at work or this or that. You need to enrich your life with art and with culture, subculture, what have you. If that's what moves you, you need to pursue your passions 100%. It may not make you rich. You may not go anywhere, but if that's what motivates you, just go into it full force, and you'll start learning, and you'll get better at your craft, and it's really what keeps me happy.
Yeah, Shawn Speedy Lopes. That's another ALANUI MELE on PBS Hawaii. Thank you, Shawn Speedy Lopes.
Thank you, Kevin.
Peace.
Mahalo for listening to ALANUI MELE on PBS Hawaii. Introduction beat by Just One O. You can listen to ALANUI MELE on all streaming platforms, and check us on social media at PBS Hawaii or www.pbshawaii.org.